Good afternoon. How are you all today? A little bit overcast today. Hopefully we get a little bit of rain a bit later on, which would be great for the garden. My name is Damien and I'm here for the next instalment of the SustainaDilly Live online workshops. And today we're going to look at creating a native garden. We're going to look at some of the principles behind why we would do it, and then, what sort of plants we might look at growing as well. Now, if you've joined us previously, you would have seen the propagation workshop. We also did no-dig gardening. So we're just trying to, provide a range of different workshops so that you can get out there in the yard and get it cranking with food, but also native plants. And I guess the critical thing with native plants is, there's a couple of key things why we would do it. And so today I'm going to try and intersperse with a bit of PowerPoint to give you a couple of slides. But firstly, I'd just like to thank Fiona for coming up from the library today and helping us out up here with coming live to you today. So welcome. All right, I'm just going to get this slide up for you. Now, have a think about why do you think we might grow a native garden? Maybe some of you are already doing it, and maybe some of you are thinking, oh, maybe I should think about that. And there's a couple of reasons why we might look at that. And I'll just quickly get this up. So I guess the key sort of principles behind native gardening is that it's water wise. And, after we went through a couple of years of drought, which culminated in those furious fires across the landscape, I guess it really, some people in the local area were talking about the fact that their dams had been dry for the first time in 20 years or more. So we want a garden that's quite resilient. And I guess the benefit of using native plants is that they're adapted to the local area, they're adapted to the local rainfalls, they're adapted to the local temperature variance. I mean, out here in the Wollondilly, it can get quite hot in summer, but then it can get quite cold in winter as well. So we get those extremes of heat and cold. I guess the other key thing about native plants is that you don't really need to fertilise them. The key about, and I'll look at this a bit later, about selecting what plants you are going to grow is ideally you want to grow a plant that's already used to growing in the type of soil that you have naturally in your area. So reduce costs for maintenance and fertilisers. The other key thing is birds and wildlife, and you can probably hear a few birds chirping in the background here. And being able to provide habitat in your yard, particularly as we see more urban development, there's lots you can do in your backyard to try and make it a bit of a haven for wildlife. Another benefit, I guess, and this is what we specialise here at the Community Nursery, is that we grow local native plants. So we're helping to conserve local biodiversity. And, we have a lot of unique plants and ecosystems that occur out here in the Wollondilly. So if we can help to conserve and protect those through growing those types of plants in our backyard, then we're helping to protect local biodiversity. Another key thing is that if you've got a good native garden going, then you're going to reduce the chance of weeds coming into your yard as well. And again, we're a similar principle that we used for our guild planting when we looked at the other fortnight with vegetables. When we plan out our native garden, we're trying to create a little mini ecosystem. And to give you a bit of an idea, you can see here in that picture, we've got multiple layers there. We've got a canopy, we've got a mid-story, and we've got ground covers and understory plants as well. And if we create a sort of a living ecosystem with native plants in our yard, then that's going to reduce the need for weeding and maintenance and that sort of thing. And again, there's a reconfirmation about plant selection and choosing plants that are really adapted to the local environment. And also the weather, the rainfall. Now, you may want to select plants based on their flowers, and often native plants get overlooked for their beautiful flowers. Often their flowers are quite small and quite subtle. And what we're trying to do here at the nursery is really, I guess, bring out the features of those native flowers. So I've got a little garden behind me here, and I might just take you off the stand and give you a bit of a look at some of the native plants that we have here. So I'll just turn the camera around here. Now, beautifully in here, we've got this really delicate little grevillea plant here. It only grows to about waist high. They get covered in beautiful red flowers. The bees have been buzzing away on this one today and really, collecting lots of pollen and nectar. Now up here we have an interesting sort of native plant as well. Now this one is a type of tree daisy. It's called Olearia viscodula. That one gets a bit taller, gets up to about 2 meters high. But as I step back, you can see we've got the overstory of the Olearia there, and then we've got an understory down here of the grevillea plant. I'm just going to flip you around to this other garden bed over here. Now, I guess I'd just quickly like to acknowledge that, sorry, I got my hand in front of the camera there. A lot of these gardens were set up by one of our founding volunteers, and she recently passed away. Her name was Robin Davies, and she's been an amazing advocate for native plants and for looking after the environment throughout the Wollondilly for absolutely decades. Her and her partner, Ron, have really led the way as far as getting the community nursery set up, but getting all these native gardens happening as well. And that every time Robin was here, she always put a lot of time and effort into creating these gardens. So we've dedicated these gardens in memory of Robin, and this is her legacy that she's left behind. So big thank you to Robin and all the amazing effort that she put in down here. So I'm just going to switch you back around. Now, talking about layering here, now I've got this big tall plant here is actually a native, it's a Bubiella, a Myoporum Bubiella. It gets these really nice little flowers, purple fruits. Now, there's actually a mob down in Wollongong who are making gin out of Bubiella berries. So it gets a juicy fruit that's edible. As you can see, it gets up to quite a tall shrub. That's getting up to about 3 or 4 meters there. But as we zoom in and start looking at our understory, down here, we've got the little Darwinia just about to come into flower. Beautiful little red flowers. There's a little flower just there starting to sprout. We've got an understory of lily pilly in there as well. Again, perfect time of year. You can see the fresh red growth just starting to grow. This is a type of Syzygium, and nice little flower berries starting to grow. They get into quite a decent sized tree, so they're probably more of a shade tree. So at some stage, if you look up through there, it's just starting to stick its head out. So we might have to prune some of these lower branches. Now this garden is really heavily stacked. In here, we've got a beautiful little Melaleuca Erabescence. It's a Melaleuca that only grows about 2 meters tall, doesn't go too big, so it's in the paperbark family. Again, providing great pollen and nectar for birds and insects. Now, another really good plant that often gets overlooked is the blackthorn here. Now, a lot of people don't like this plant because it's got thorns on it. But the good thing about blackthorn is that it provides really great protection for small native birds. Now, I don't know if you've got Indian miners or bell miners in your area, but those birds are quite dominant, and they'll often scare away the younger birds. So by having that blackthorn there, just in behind me here, you're helping to provide protection for those little small birds like fairy wrens and finches and all that sort of stuff. So getting a bit of blackthorn in there as your understory, providing, and again, by having a nice dense garden like this, we are really providing great protection for those little tiny birds to keep them away from things. And also currawongs, they can be quite dominating sort of birds as well. So by creating that structured habitat within your yard, that layered sort of gardening with a canopy and a mid-story and an understory, then you're going to ensure that you're providing a nice protective habitat and food for insects and little small birds and that sort of stuff as well. So do we have any questions out there so far, Fiona? Is everyone sitting sweet? Have we got a few people tuned in?
Yeah, we've got a few people watching, but no questions as yet.
Okay, no worries. As we go throughout the session, feel free to pop up any questions so we can sort of hone in any particular things that you're trying to find out about. Now, I'm just going to switch the camera around again. We're going to have a look at some of our ground story plants here. So here this is what we call a bamboo grass, and it's quite a tall grass. It gets to like 1 metre high. It has these beautiful wispy sort of seed heads, and it provides a nice structure. Again, a lot of the smaller birds like to eat the grass seed on that. But then if we zoom down here and look down to our understory here, we've got a beautiful little salt bush. Now these have edible red berries. They're a really good pioneer sort of plant. They'll quite happily grow in amongst grass, and often on our bush regeneration sites, this will come up as a first port of call to start establishing and colonising the understory there. So this is a little salt bush, Inaria hastata. Really easy to grow from cuttings, really easy to grow from seed. And yeah, spring, summertime, it produces these tiny little red berries that are really sweet and tasty. And then if we go just one step further, we've got our mid-story here of the Bacchausia myrtifolia. That's a native myrtle. Now this normally grows along rocky sort of creek lines, so it doesn't mind getting its feet wet. But you can see here, as I zoom up, it's handling this dry sort of area quite well. So we've got a nice little mix of plants there. We've really got our canopy, and we've got our mid-story, and then we've got ground covers. I'm just putting you back on the stand here. And our ground covers as well. Now, I'll just reactivate our slide here. Now, when it comes to establishing your garden, there's a couple of key principles that I guess you want to look at. Now, for me at my house, I've got some existing garden beds that had exotic plants going in them, and I'm now transferring them into native. So what I've been doing is going through, weeding out any grasses. If you feel like sheet mulching, if you've got some sort of good quality topsoil, then you can do that. But the key is, even if you're just, where you're planting your plant, even if you're just clearing the grass out to about maybe 30 to 50 centimetres around, that way when your plant is establishing, it's not competing with those grass roots. So getting rid of that grass around where you're planting is a critical sort of point. Now, soil preparation. Generally what I tend to do is I'll dig the hole the day before, particularly when it's been dry. I always try to dig the hole at least twice the width and twice the depth of the pot. I want to make sure that there's nice soft soil for those new roots to grow into. And if you can, the bigger you can dig it, the better, basically. But definitely at least twice the size of your pot, both in depth and width. I then actually fill the hole with water. So I might put anywhere between 2 and 3 litres of water into the hole, let that soak in, and then either 4 or 5 hours later, or even the next day, I then come back and do my planting. When it has been really dry, it can often take a while for that water to really seep in. Now, when it comes to planting day, I get some coconut fibre, and I've mentioned that in our previous workshop. Coconut fibre is a really great product. I put that in a bucket of water and soak it up, and so that it absorbs all that moisture. And then when it comes to planting day, I put a handful of that into the bottom of the hole, and then I plant in on top of that. Now, before I do plant the plant, when I get it out of the pot, you can see from the picture there that all the roots have been quite constrained by the pot itself. And what you tend to find is after you plant the plant, the roots will keep growing in the shape of the pot. So when you take the plant out of the pot, get in there and try to tease out those roots. Maybe even if there's any roots that are bent at a right angle, actually trim them off. And then make sure those roots are all nice and loose before you plant them in the ground. And then we're going to ensure that those roots are then going to be free to grow out into that nice, fresh, crumbled soil. Now, if you are digging in a clay soil, you really need to think about breaking those clods of clay soil up, because they will stay like big chunks and the roots are going to find it really hard. So if you have got a clay soil, mix some of that coconut fibre through, break up the clods as much as you can, because those fresh roots, when they come out of the pot, they want to be growing into a nice soft soil, and that will just help them establish more quickly. We cover that back over. Now, if you do have some sea salt, it's really good to water your plants in with sea salt. Sea salt, even for native plants, it's a root stimulator. So, you know, all plants, once they, you know, go through a bit of what we call transplant shock. When you take them out of the pot and put them in the ground, they go into a little bit of shock. Making sure they've got plenty of water and giving them a good feed of sea salt is going to help stimulate that root growth, so those plants again get a better chance of trying to establish. Now, one of the other key issues about clay soil, particularly if you want to try and grow waratahs and things like that. So I'm just trying to get this slide back up again. Now, often what will happen is that, you know, the waratah or, you know, the banksia or protea will grow for a couple of years, and then it hits that clay and just keels over. So one thing that we can do if we're trying to grow native plants that are more from a free draining sandstone sort of soil, we can actually do a raised bed and put a lighter, freer draining soil in that bed, and that's just going to help for drainage and give those native plants that prefer that a bit of a chance to grow. Now, having said that, there are a whole bunch of native plants that grow really well in clay. So if you don't want to do a raised bed, just pick the right plants that grow in those nice heavy clays and you won't have an issue. Now, sandstone is often something that's well used in the garden, and I guess one thing, if you are out there sourcing your sandstone, make sure it's been ethically sourced. Unfortunately, there's been a number of cases where people have headed out into the bush and removed a bunch of bush rock to then sell to the landscaping market. And, you know, that's removing habitat from the bush. So we don't want our gardening to be an impact on the bush as well. I'm lucky where I live. I'm on a big, you know, all under my area there is all sandstone. And so I fortunately had a whole bunch of sandstone around my yard, which I've been able to convert into beds. But I'll give you a quick look at that garden bed that we we're just looking at before. Now down here you can see we've got some old sleepers that have again, you know, quite a good way of creating a raised bed here. Now if we come around the other side, if you're feeling a bit more adventurous, we've got some nice ethically sourced sandstone here that's given a nice high raised bed. And you know, if you can get up to 40 to 50 centimetres, then you know you're going to get good drainage on that. Now I thought I'd zoom in on a couple of other little plants here. Now we've got this beautiful little pig face here. You can see in a rockery type of situation, the pig face just cascades down over the front there. It's a bush tucker plant as well. It gets these beautiful pinky purple flowers. But then, you know, just to show you how hardy some of the natives really are, we're on the edge of the car park here at the nursery, and down here, just growing in the gravel, we've got a little emu bush, a little prostrate emu bush, Myoporum debile, and that's quite easily growing on the hard gravel here. Gets these little berries on there that turn purple when they get ripe, and the birds absolutely love those. So if you're looking for a really hardy ground cover that can tolerate the dry and really tolerate those conditions, then you can't go too far wrong with the little prostrate emu bush here. And over here, we've even got another little, you can see these little red berries in there. This again is a little type of salt bush, a little Inadia, and again it's quite happily growing out of the crack in the rocks there and growing out on that dry gravel. So with our natives, we really do have a range of options that can grow in a variety of different circumstances. Now if we're looking for some really nice floral, you know, when most people come into the nursery, there's particular plants that they're already checking out, and here we've got a beautiful callistum, and this is a local variety, red flowering, so it's tolerant of the local soils and the local conditions. It gets up to about 2 meters, maybe 3 meters max, and that's providing really great nectar for the birds. And that's right alongside the Melaleuca Erabescence here, that short paper bark that only grows to a couple of meters tall. Sometimes you can get these with a slight little pinky tinge, And they're, again, just providing really nice colour and floral sort of options. Now over here, we've got a very spectacular plant. Now this is our native Frangipani. Now these get up to quite a decent size. Now, naturally, so that's up to about probably 4 metres already. Now these plants normally occur up the north coast, but they are growing quite well here. This tree, like I say, is probably 5 or 6 years old, and it's growing really well and establishing quite well. So again, we've got that as our canopy tree sitting up there, and then we've got an understory of an acacia, and we've got the understory of the Melaleuca. And
Sorry, Damo, does the Frangipani have a scent? The native Frangipani?
Yes, it does. Yeah, look, it's not as strong as like a jasmine or your normal Frangipani, but it does have an aroma to it, definitely. Okay. And it's great. I mean, the honeybees love it. They get right in there, and they get absolutely covered. This thing is just about to really start flowering its head off. So, but yeah, they get up to a good sized tree. So you need a bit of space for these. They'll get up to probably about 5 metres or so.
Lovely.
Now with the bottle brushes, you can actually put those in water and get quite a sweet, almost like cordial type drink if you leave the bottle brush flowers in there for a couple of hours in the water to let that nectar just ooze out into your water, and you have quite a refreshing drink for summer. All right, so let's just quickly recap. Plant selection. Think about your soil types. The benefits of growing local native plants is they're adapted to the local weather conditions. If you do want to grow things like waratahs, banksias, stuff that would normally grow in a sandstone country and you're in clay soils, think about doing a raised bed. And you can do that with either, sleepers or recycled timbers, or maybe you've got some sandstone kicking around the yard as well. I'm just going to head back to our PowerPoint here. And mulch. Mulch is the next sort of key thing. Now, the thing about mulch, there's a couple of different benefits about mulch. It's it's helping to reduce weeds. B, it's helping to reduce moisture loss. But one of the key issues that can also occur when you put quite a heavy bark mulch on there is that can then be a layer that stops water from getting into your garden. So generally when I do a mulch, I try to have a mixed mulch. So I've listed a few things on there, maybe some sugarcane, maybe some straw. But if you want to go a native type of mulch, if you can get a mulch that's got a mixture of leaves and twigs as well as bark, then it's more like you're trying to create a natural, if you go for a walk out in the forest under a big gum tree, you're going to see a nice leafy mulch sort of occurring there. Sorry, I've just turned that around the wrong way. You're going to see a nice leafy mulch there, and that's what we want under our garden bed. We want to create a nice humusy sort of layer, a place that's going to keep the weeds down, a place that's going to retain moisture, but also something that's going to provide habitat for insects and worms and microorganisms and stuff that go through our soil, that's just going to ensure that our garden bed is nice and healthy. So I thought I'd take you for a little walk now. So we've just been at a garden bed there. This is just out the front of our nursery. Now I'm just going to walk you down this little side path here and show you another couple of little plants as we go.
We've got one question, Damo, while you're going on your walk. A lady's got trouble with kangaroos eating all her plants, and she was wondering if there's some plants that she could actually grow that would resist, they don't like. They don't like to eat.
Yeah. I mean, I guess if you're going to go sort of spiky plants and things with like really hard leaves, things like native cypress plants and that sort of thing. I mean, generally, because we have a few landholders that are, trying to plan out trees around kangaroos, and what you tend to find is once the plant establishes and gets up to a certain height, then the issue with the kangaroos becomes a lot less. What they've done is actually ended up building, you know, either putting like a fence, like a dog mesh type of fence around it, or they've been being able to get these core flute sort of tree guards that are about 1.2 meters tall or something, just with a wooden stake. There's a bit of extra cost when it comes to planting, but once those plants get up over that 1.5 meter mark, they're going to be, yes, they'll still get eaten, but they're going to be a lot more resilient. But aside from doing your tree guards, get into the spiky stuff, you know, things like I said before, I've got the blackthorn here. And even these little grevilleas here, they've got quite spiky leaves. So there's a range of native plants that are quite spiky that just aren't as palatable. And actually, while I think of it, while we're here at the old blackthorn here, now I mentioned the spiky bush is really good to provide habitat for small birds. Now this plant actually has a chemical in there called escalin, and during World War I and World War II, this plant was used for making sunblock, and it was a big part of the sort of frontline effort was harvesting the blackthorn here to produce sunblock to be sent over to the front line. So the plants, you know, looking at plants that have multiple uses. I haven't actually gone to the point of crushing the leaves and making it myself, but here's a plant that's providing good habitat for animals, but then it's got that extra benefit as well. So yeah, spiky plants, things like cypress plants are less palatable to kangaroos. So I'm just trying to turn my camera around there. But yeah, have a look at doing some tree guards. So then at least once your plants get up to, you know, 1.5 meters tall, their roots have had a chance to get in there, excuse me, and the roots are going to have less of a chance of sort of taking those plants out. All right, let's continue on our little path down here. Now this is a little garden bed out the side of the office here. I'm just going to turn the camera around here. Now we've got a beautiful flower here. It's, you know, it's almost got a vibe like an orchid sort of flower. You can see in there. Now this is a type of Emu Bush. The insects absolutely love it. The bees get in there. And again, it's not too big a shrub. It gets to about 2 meters tall. It's quite easy to grow from cuttings. And we have a few plants like that there here at the nursery. But then we've also got a little scrambling lily growing here as well. It's just about to go and flower. It really is a beautiful time of year. So you can get, you know, little meandering vines going through your native there. So you've got a real mix. And then that way you're also providing a range of flowers at different times of the year to try and ensure that birds have got food all the way along. So I'm just going to head round the front. And, oh, sorry, there was something I meant to show you back here. Now, I mentioned before about growing a garden for native animals and trying to create habitat. Now, a couple of aspects I thought I'd just look in over here. Now, we're not just talking about birds. Obviously, I've mentioned insects, but also there are a lot of lizards and that sort of stuff around in the yard as well. So if you can get some rocks into your garden, and I know one of our volunteers, they've got a nice sort of rockery around the edge of their yard, and they said the other day they've got a massive blue tongue that's living in under the rocks there. So I'm just going to flick the camera around here. So if you can get some rocks to sort of put in place, there's nice little sort of nooks and crannies in here where lizards can hang out and sort of warm up and be away from the watchful eye of birds and stuff like that. So they, you know, if you can put a few rocks and stuff through your garden, you're creating a bit of structure in the garden, but you're also providing habitat for lizards and that sort of stuff. Now, if we zoom in through here, we have a very simple little water bowl here. So we've got a little cut log. We've got a little Tassie tiger figurine there. But in here, I've just got a little container of water. Now, it's just sitting on a little cut log. Now, the main thing about if you're going to have a little water bowl, you don't want it too deep. Now, the good thing about this bit here, it's got a raised section in the middle. Now, if your water is deep, make sure you put a couple of rocks in there so that if a bird does fall in, they can stand up on top. The other thing you can do is put a stick along the side here, and that then gives birds an opportunity to climb out of the water bowl and avoid them from drowning in the water, which is the last thing we want. But these little sort of structures scattered around the garden. And the good thing about this also, if I zoom out, you can see it's really hidden under the trees in there. Now, for those little birds, that's perfect because they can get in there, they can get a drink of water, and it's going to, they're going to be sheltered away from some of those more aggressive, Indian miners and bell miners and that sort of stuff there. So as we go exploring further around the garden, you'll see more of those little water bowls around the place. Now, another quick little plant I've just stumbled upon here. Now, a lot of people tend to grow the seaside daisy, Erigeron kavinskianus, but it's an exotic plant and it's quite weedy. But here we have a little native. Now, generally you'll find there's always a native plant that will grow in the same form or habit as some other plant from overseas. Now, this one's called a brachycomb. It's got a beautiful little pink flower, and I personally think it's much more attractive than the seaside daisy. This is only a young one, but they will quite easily sort of grow through this area. They don't grow too vigorously, but that's, again, a nice little alternative to growing a plant like the seaside daisy, which can become a weed out in the bush. So when you're building a garden, have a think about habitat. Getting some hollow logs, maybe some rocks and that sort of stuff in there as well. And then we're ensuring that we're providing extra habitat, not just plants as far as, food from flowers and habitat for nesting and that sort of stuff, but we're providing little hidey holes and water holes for those animals to eat as well. How are we going, Fiona? Do we have any more questions out there? Actually, here we go. Here's a nice little plant here. Now, I mentioned before about the pig face. Now, these are the beautiful flowers of the pig face. Really bright pink. Actually, there's a really good one just over here. Absolutely beautiful. Now, it's a succulent plant, and as I zoom back, you can see that's really covered quite well as a ground cover through there. They're very hardy. These normally grow down on the coast, so they're used to salt winds. They've got these really fleshy leaves. As you remember from that shot before, they were cascading down over a dry rock wall. They're easy to grow from cuttings. When the flower is spent, and this flower is nearly spent, this bottom part will start to swell up, and that's actually edible. It's a bush tucker plant, the old pig face. So once those petals, these will swell up, and then you've got a bit of bush tucker to eat as well. All righty. Now, I might just quickly switch to my screen again.
Yeah, sorry, Damo, there was no questions as yet. So if you've got some, send them in.
Yeah, no worries. Now, I've mentioned before, we were in drought conditions last year, and, we had all those strict water restrictions going on. And at one point there, you weren't allowed to use a hose or a tap. You could only use, you could only have a dripper irrigation system on a timer. Now, in here, you'll see there's a couple of little options there. Now, the good thing about the dripper lines is that you can shape them. They can go in all sorts of directions. On the right-hand side there, you'll see a great little setup with a water tank. Maybe you're capturing some of your water off your roof, and that way you've got a gravity-fed system coming into a dripper line. If you've got trees in the bottom right-hand corner there, you can see you run a main line, and then you run little dripper lines around each tree. That certainly be a good thing if when you're trying to establish your garden. But it's something you probably want to put in before you build your garden. Ideally, you want to put the dripper line under the mulch, and then that way it's that water's getting right down into the roots. I also like to have a little sprinkler system, and you'll see in the bottom left-hand corner there is some little twirly sprinkler heads. They don't require much pressure, Again, I only water in the morning or in the night time. Outside of those hot times, I generally like to water at night because then it's got a chance to soak in throughout the evening before it gets hot the next day. Whereas I found, particularly on hot days, if I water in the morning, it could be getting hot by 10 o'clock and that water hasn't had a chance to really get in there. So a little twirly head sprinkler system combined with a dripper system under your mulch can provide a couple of different options for watering your garden. Having said that, like I mentioned before, the whole benefit of using natives is that we are not needing to water our plants so much. The benefit about using native plants is that they're adapted to the soils, they're adapted to rainfall. Now, I thought I'd have a quick look over here. We've just got a couple of more plants to have a squiz at here. Now, I mentioned before about different types of mulch. Now, in this area, we've actually got a bit of a stone sort of bed, a bit of a dry area. Again, the lizards love basking on this. But then we've got our layers. So we've got a beautiful Lomandra mat rush there. They're super hardy. Frogs love getting down in the base of them. They don't mind getting wet feet, and they'll quite happily grow in dry conditions as well. So they're a very versatile plant. And then just over the back there, we've got a beautiful Gaiami Lily. Again, nice and hardy. Now, these are a plant that generally like to grow in sandy soils. So again, we're going to having a slightly raised bed where that water can drain away. You know, we've got the pebbles down the bottom here so that when it does rain, that water is going to quite freely drain out from the bottom of that garden bed. We've just got a single layer sleeper here, but then the bed is raised up, going back. And as that water drains down, it can come down through this gravel layer at the front here. So again, for a plant like that, we're providing a bit of scope for the drainage for that Gaiami Lily out there. Now back here, we've got a native peach. They get up to quite a good size. They're very hardy. That's about as tall as they get. This one's about 10 years old. Super hardy. They get little berries, so the birds love them. They grow quite quickly at first. So I've got some in my yard that have been in there for 2 years and they're already up to about 3 meters high. They don't tend to grow thick, so they're not really that good as a screening plant. But they're a great plant as a loose overstory where you can get your understory, where we've got our lomandras and our Gaiami lilies down there as well. Now we've got a few more little rockery sections over here. So again, we've got, I'll zoom back a little bit. So again, we've got rocks sort of laid out for our garden border. You know, nice big rocks like this, a perfect little habitat for lizards to hang out under and keep warm. And then right next to it here, we've got a native flax lily. Now this is a Dianella. Now these again are just about to flower. Now these flower spikes, when they open up, are a beautiful deep purpley blue colour with a yellow, and all those little buds come out. And then they come out with all these beautiful purple berries and really tasty, nice bush tucker plant. Now the leaves on this were actually, as I said, it's a native flax. So traditionally the leaves on these were stripped up and used to make twine for making dilly bags and that sort of stuff as well. So the Dianella, Dianella cerulean, Dianella longifolia, and they tend to sort of, they'll spread slowly under the ground and just gradually establish in an area. But the flowers, when they come out, absolutely beautiful. So totally recommend the Dianella, super hardy and really good quality plant. Alrighty. So let's just head back over to my little display here and make sure I'm keeping on track, because I get distracted in the garden and start walking around, hanging out. Maintenance. Oh, yes, indeed. Maintenance is always an important thing. You know, any sort of garden is going to require maintenance. And it's, you know, yes, we are minimising our maintenance by having natives. We're minimising maintenance by having mulch. We're minimising maintenance because we've got a structured garden with ground covers, mid-story, overstory. and ideally we're planning that out. But you know, we go through drought times, and native plants, as soon as and even other plants, when there's a bit of a drought, they'll start to drop their leaves and start to drop their branches and that sort of stuff. So a bit of strategic pruning always goes well. Generally, even with plants, you know, exotic plants like abelias and that sort of stuff, at this time of year, or even probably a month ago, I tend to go through and start pruning back all the dead wood, and just reducing any straggly branches and all that sort of stuff, to try and make sure that the plant's got a chance to reactivate and regrow during the springtime there. So getting in and doing a bit of strategic pruning is always an integral part of the garden. It's quite therapeutic too. I love getting in there and just shaping up the plants. If you have got a dense garden, very similar to our veggie gardening concept the other week, because you've got a dense layer of plants, you need to get in there and thin branches out so the plants have a chance to grow. But by having a nice batch of plants in there, you're going to minimise your weeds. Now, fertiliser, look, generally you don't need to fertilise native plants. Native plants are susceptible to phosphorus. They don't like phosphorus at all, particularly things like Banksias, Grevilleas, also plants in your wattle family or your native peas. They're very susceptible to phosphorus. So if you are going to fertilise, you know, things like manures and stuff, they're just going to knock the native plants out because there's too much phosphorus in there. If you are going to get a fertiliser, try to get one that's low in phosphorus. But like I said before, generally, if you're using local plants, they're going to be adapted to the local conditions. I also mentioned before about sea sole. Sea sole is a great root stimulant. When I do use it on natives, I tend to use it at half the recommended rate. And with sea sole, that's going to stimulate the root growth. It also has some micronutrients. Sea sole or seaweed is a holistic fertilizer. It's not too high in phosphorus, so it's not going to affect the plants. And that will just help those plants establish. Even if you give it a water once a week or so while the plant's first establishing, just for the first month or so. Now, I mentioned before about creating habitat. Now, obviously, our flowers and our spiky plants are providing protection, but you can use things like artificial hollows. Now, you can see in the bottom left-hand corner there's a bit of a nest box. Now, the Tarmore men's shed and a few of the other men's sheds have been making nest boxes, and they've been working with local land services. And what they've found is that there are different nest boxes needed for different species of animals. So microbats require a certain type of nest box, squirrel gliders, parrots, they all have different requirements. So if you are interested in getting some nest boxes, contact the Tarmore Men's Shed and they'd be more than happy to provide. Now, I mentioned about water as well. You know, I love that sort of natural water bowl in the centre there. If you can get sort of, you know, natural products to create those little water bowls, little drinking stations around the place, then you're going to help create a bit of extra habitat. And again, I've got another little water bowl here. Sorry, I've just got to turn that off for a second. We're on the home stretch, folks. So, yeah, if you've got any specific questions, let me know. Now, just over here, we've just got an old bit of stormwater pipe, and that's been buried in the ground, and then we've just put a drip tray on top there. Now you can see we've got a rock there. That means if a bird goes into that water, it's going to easily climb out and be able to get out of that water. Now we've got quite a good layer of mulch here, done it nice and thick. And as you can see from that mulch, there's leaves, there's bits of bark, there's stringy bark, there's little bits of wood chip, there's little bits of sticks. So if you can get a nice Yuki mulch that's got a nice mix of material in there, you're just going to get a much better bed. You're going to get good moisture absorption, and it's going to really keep those weeds down. Unfortunately, you've always got to do weeds, so that's just the nature of gardening. But if you can minimise your weeds, then that's what it's all about. All right. I'll just head back to my little screen here. We're on the home stretch. So creating habitat's a really good one. You know, hollow logs, nest boxes, watering holes, strategically placed rocks and that sort of stuff, all providing habitats for lizards and birds. Now, the nursery is going to be opening up hopefully within the next 2 to 3 weeks, and we've just opened up to our volunteers, so we're very stoked. We had our first set of volunteers came back yesterday, and we've got a new batch of volunteers. So they're just going to spend the next couple of weeks getting our nursery nice and ship shape. We've got lots of plants ready to go. And a lot of the plants that you've seen that I've shown you today, we have available at the nursery. As a resident of the Wollondilly, you're entitled to 5 free plants per quarter. And if you've got your waste booklet, you should have got your little native plant voucher there as well. Now, if you're doing any environmental type works, you know, maybe you're restoring a creek line out the back of your house, maybe you've been removing some privet, maybe you're trying to create some habitat. If you work in a local land care, bush care group, or maybe, you know, your local school within the Wollondilly, you can get access to more plants. If you're doing that type of activity, just give us a line at the nursery and we can sort you out there. Now, I'll just quickly go to my display again. Yeah, we looked at, so there's a couple of nice little ideas there of creating, you know, even little symbol at the bottom left-hand corner, just a little water bowl, a few rocks placed around it. And, you know, you can see that stick there has been laid down through the center of that water bowl on the left-hand side there as a chance for, you know, birds to be able to climb out. But then over on the right-hand side there, we've got an even more, so quite a wide but shallow water hole there, just to provide a bit of water and drinking. If you're looking for some garden design ideas, there's Australian Native Plant Society. They have a great website with heaps of different garden designs there. So if you're looking for some ideas, go and check that out. And I mentioned about bush tucker. You know, we can, that's the Dianella berries on the left there that I just showed you before, those beautiful purple berries. And then on the right-hand side, we've got the Warragul Greens there. And interestingly enough, with those Warragul Greens, I went over to Brazil a number of decades ago, and when I went into the supermarket there, there was the Warragul Greens in the supermarket there next to the English spinach. So Warragul Greens is really good tucker, really easy to grow, and when you grow it in an organic veggie garden, they get really big leaves on them, really easy to grow from cutting. So, you know, try and incorporate a bit of bush tucker into your garden as well. You know, provide a bit of habitat for your local birds. You're helping to condition the soil. You know, if you need to go an irrigation system, you think about that. But otherwise, the main thing is ensuring you've got plenty of mulch, a nice, good mix of mulch and a diversity of plants. I've got one more little water bowl here I thought I'd show you. And this is classic Robin. She really loved her garden. And this is a beautiful, you know, you can get creative in the garden. So down here, we've got a rock with a little clay water bowl there. And I've got this beautiful little bird sculpture there as well. We've got a few plants around it again, so that when those little birds come in, they're sheltered away and they can get a nice little drink. So all these little water bowls are scattered everywhere throughout the garden. They don't have to be big. This one's probably, you know, as you can see from the size of my hand, it's not much bigger than my hand. But that way you're providing little water for the birds to have a drink while they go and visit your garden. All right, well, that about wraps it up. I think that was fast and furious, that one. I hope you enjoyed seeing our garden today. If you think of any questions outside of today, feel free to drop us a line. We will be putting this video up on YouTube later on, so you can come back or share it with your friends. Like I said, the community nursery will be open soon, hopefully within the next 3 weeks. We've just got our volunteers back. As a local resident, you get access to 5 free plants per quarter. And actually, I thought I would just give you a quick view of the nursery, just so you can see how many plants we've got growing. The place is absolutely thriving at the moment. We've got these beautiful paper daisies here. They're like a yellow paper daisy. All sorts of beautiful flowers at the moment. We've got pig face, and even down here, we've got our native mint bush. Beautiful native mint bush. Now the leaves of that have been used recently as a substitute for rosemary in roasting lamb and fish and that sort of stuff. So we've got lots of plants. Stay tuned to Council's website for when we reopen, and yeah, don't forget your vouchers. So like I say, about 2 to 3 weeks time, come down. It looks like we're going to have a bit of a damp October, so it's a good time to plant. If you've got any extra questions, please feel free to send us a line. Otherwise, thank you for attending today. We've got any questions there, Fiona, or we're all good?
Yeah, no questions, but thanks, Damo. And we've got a chicken one coming up, haven't we, live at Piccolo Farms soon?
Yes, that's right. So in a fortnight's time, it'll be on the Tuesday. The great people from Piccolo Farm, they were recently... we're on Sydney Weekender. They got profiled on there. They're organic permaculture farm. They grow chickens. So if you're interested in learning about how to grow chickens at home, tune into that. That's next Tuesday week. I can't remember the date. It might be the 14th or something. But tune into the Wollondilly Library where you can find out more about that. And yeah, stay tuned. We're going to have more workshops coming up throughout the year. If you think of any more questions after, or, just send us a line at the nursery or to the Wollondilly Library there, and we'll get back to you. And thanks again for joining in today. Happy gardening. Get out there, get your natives, get your veggies going, and let's get some more plants in the ground, eh? All right, take care. Bye for now.